Hi everyone, this is Beck from John Pye Real Estate, and today I'm incredibly privileged and honoured to be able to interview Margaret from O'Connor's Strata, who is located in Parramatta, but in fact take care of quite a few strata blocks in all over the metro region of Sydney, and also has some limited services that they do offer to country areas as well in New South Wales. So Margaret, hello and welcome. Thank you for agreeing to be interviewed today.
It's a pleasure, Beck. Thanks for inviting me. It's always good to talk about strata because it's a dynamic industry that keeps growing and there's always something new. So happy to do so.
Thank you. Okay, so tell me, how long have you actually been in the industry?
Oh, quite a while. Established the business in 1985. So I've seen strata go through various changes, and it's undergone enormous changes since then, from the very small apartment through to now into the thousands. So it's really a journey where I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there's always quite a variation of all of those things continually when you're dealing with people living together and changing legislation. So it's quite a varied range of experience in, I suppose, residential, commercial, industrial, service departments and community associations involving golf courses and so on. So it's quite a varied range of strata.
That's amazing. It definitely is. And your experience is extensive, to say the least. So I'm glad that we've got you on the phone today. So we're touching on relationships within these communities and how we can optimize them and have amazing relationships. So tell me, what are the key elements to being a great strata home occupier?
I guess the main thing for everyone's benefit, primarily for the individual as well as the building itself, is to take an interest in the building, attending to meetings, and making sure that, as I suppose, that they understand that as a community involved, a mindset change is really important, so that you're not the person who makes all the decisions. That's the biggest thing. And to become, I suppose, to use your term, a great strata home occupier, if you get that from the beginning, you're able to then move into the various areas where strata differentiates itself from being just your own home. So you have a community mindset, one of cooperation and a real understanding of how things work, because if you don't understand how things work, it's hard for you to slot into the community lifestyle. But cooperation and working with the other people who live in the strata complex is really key, about parking and noise and parties and pets, all those sorts of things. That absolutely can make or break a whole complex, and it makes it a great place for you to live as an individual, but it also, you have a great asset there as well. So,
Okay, so what about a landlord's perspective? So in terms of being a great landlord within a strata plan that they're not living in?
Well, the landlord, I suppose, has to really work in tandem with the property manager. The property manager has quite a key role, and there's another party involved. Equally with the landlord, it's great for them to be involved in the meetings, so that they're either come and vote and attend. The new legislation makes it difficult for the property manager to now be on the committee. So if they want a strong representation, it's very good for the landlord to come along and not ignore the strata meetings, but also just to be sure that the property manager they're working with obtains a copy of the current bylaws prior to the lease being prepared and before the property manager seeks tenants, because the property manager might have bylaws that were in place 6 months ago, 3 months ago, or even in fact years ago, and they've either been changed dramatically or the things have been added, which could create quite an issue once the tenant moves in, because they're also responsible for complying with the bylaws equally as much as an owner. So that's a really quite an often overlooked component. Property managers may not be necessarily totally aware that bylaws are a very dynamic thing. They can change literally from week to week. And the current legislation actually has required that every strata plan review their bylaws before the 30th of November of this year. So there could be significant changes as we've experienced here. People bringing in all sorts of anti-smoking bylaws, number of occupants in an apartment, quite a number of things that can impact the landlord, impact the tenant, and then in turn impact the property manager. So the landlord also needs to have quite an understanding of the components rather than just leaving it to the property manager. An active role is also important for a landlord, different to a homeowner, an occupier, but equally as important that there be an active rather than a passive involvement.
Okay, so really an active relationship is what's key here.
Yes, that's right. Active understanding of the landscape that you're involved in would be number one. So, because sometimes people can be active, but they don't have the understanding. It all skews one way or the other. The understanding first, and then an active relationship between the landlord, property manager, strata manager, not necessarily in that order, so that everyone knows what's going on at the building rather than assuming, which then creates problems for everyone.
I bet. And like you said at the very beginning, you've probably seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, I guess a lot of it becomes distressing because, let's say, for example, we might have had, it's not as easy to enforce this with the recent legislation, but let's say there's a very strict policy about pets and they might have cats only or whatever it might be, and the property manager hasn't obtained a copy of the current bylaws, and the property manager says to the landlord, do you have a problem with pets? And they say, oh no, a small dog or small cat is fine. Then the tenant moves in with, Fifi, their beloved little puppy that they can't live without, and someone notifies the strata manager that there's a dog on the premises, and then we have to go through the whole process. So it's an emotional turmoil for the tenant because they want the pet. The landlord's got a tenant there who's now breaching the bylaws, who doesn't want to get rid of the dog. The property manager may have overlooked or not thought to get the current bylaws, which is disregarded. They're still enforceable. So we just have a mess that has to be sorted out where it could be avoided so easily at the very beginning.
That I can understand that would be very stressful. So let me ask you this: what are some things that you wish every strata owner knew? Maybe some tips or hints or extra info on this subject that we're talking about.
I guess I know I keep harping on this word understanding, but it's so lacking. That's why we put years ago now, pre-2000, we set up a strata information site called Strata Man, so that people would have an understanding, because we felt that people had no idea what they were getting into. So I think the absolutely key things would be knowledge about the community environment that you're moving into, an understanding that there are players in this. They've got owners and occupiers, a strata committee and the strata manager. Not thinking that, well, no matter what happens at the building, it's the strata manager must fix it. Whatever it is, it may not be something that a strata manager has within their service level. It may be something they don't have authority over. It could be something that's a police matter. It could be something that's not within the scope of the fees that are being charged. I would like everyone to I suppose have that as a framework, and then I suppose just to be reasonable, that if someone's parking in your car space, just a simple phone call or email and we can try and sort it out, rather than just going going really heavy, in attitude or communication or email to the person who's parking there, try and resolve it at an amicable level. And if they're keeping that we're all in this together community neighbour mindset rather than going down the legal bylaw enforcement fair trading route, that absolutely makes for a dynamically different, harmonious environment for owners to live in. And they're our best buildings. When we can get people to stop parking there and say, consider your neighbours and the noise and so on, it's a wonderful environment. People love it. But equally, if they don't go down that path, it's a very constrained environment that everyone, feels it's a harsh environment to live in. So I guess my communication of the right sort, say with your strata manager, instead of some of the buildings we manage are over 300 apartments.
Wow.
It's impossible for me to communicate on every issue at every point with 300 people, all of whom I don't have their emails addressed. So just to be mindful that as a mere strata manager, we cannot communicate the detail to every person, every moment, all the time. So we have to have a liaison person we can speak with so that they understand what's happening. So strata living is more about relationships than people really realise. They see strata as bricks and mortar, a financial decision and what have you, but really the environment and the whole space of providing something that everyone enjoys living in. Difficult. It's very difficult. We've tried to do some groundbreaking sort of work in this arena, but it's pioneering work, very difficult, but it's easier to do with bricks and mortar and finance. But to build that sense of community and an environment where people really enjoy living, together in closer proximity, that's the absolute key. And I think if I had to pick one item, if people get that the win is that it becomes a highly desirable place to live and well, in fact, to buy as an investment, because there's starting to be a few buildings that are starting to get some, I suppose, credit for the environment. I think in Canada there's actually a website that gives like a community voting thing to what it's like to live there. I don't know if that
that might take off.
Not, but that could be an interesting dynamic, I guess. But, that's the relationships, and I know you said we're talking about relationships,
yes.
But it's relationships at the lifestyle level, but also relationships, when you just the day-to-day tasks and the strata legislation. It's all levels, really.
Yeah. Well, I didn't actually have this on our list of questions, but since we've touched on home occupier and landlord, would you be open to talking about from a tenant's perspective? What would could you give some idea into that? I guess it's probably the same as what we've already touched on in terms of.
Well, essentially, because a tenant is in exactly the same position, an individual might be an owner occupier, or they're a tenant occupier, so they're equally involved with the whole relationship thing. So that and the new legislation, well, tenants can now come to general meetings and so forth. So that's a statement by the legislators that they want tenants more involved in the actual. They can't make the decisions, but they can provide input.
Yes.
The decisions are left to just the owners, but they can provide input, and on certain cases, I won't bore you with all the details, you can have a tenant representative on the strata committee, which is revolutionary for how it's been over the last number of years. So that's a statement that like in Europe, as we tend to move more to that model where people are renting more and they might have investments in other places, but apartments are probably 50% or more mix of tenancy and owners. So there's a fair contribution. So it's good to see that the government hasn't totally disregarded that component in the new legislation. But
yes.
I haven't seen the outworking of that as yet to see how effective it is.
Yes.
But I think it's a step in the right direction. Don't know if it'll solve what they're trying to solve, but it's a step in the right direction of involvement and to produce harmony in a building rather than have everyone, at each other. And yes, it's a great investment, but nobody wants to live there.
I think it's actually a good change. I think it will break down barriers of them and us mentality. I think to be able to have, because I've actually met over my experience, and I started in real estate back around 2000, 2001. In my time listing and selling and being involved with tenants and also landlords, I've actually come across some amazing tenants who have actually taken care of properties and been wanting to be invested in the block. I've come across that a lot. So I think that is a positive change.
Well, that's right, because that comes back to the very first point when you said, what are the key elements for a great strata occupier? I said something along the lines to take an interest in the building. Well, that's a personality trait sometimes rather than a legal status. So you can have a tenant who has far more interest in the building than someone who is an owner-occupier.
Yes.
So it isn't necessarily an equation that owner-occupier equals more interest. I have found that's certainly not the case. So,
right.
But it's how do you communicate as a mere strata manager? How do we communicate at that level with everyone on a broader sense? There've been some really unfortunate stories about strata plans who tried to start a Facebook page and so forth. In that environment, because of the legalities, they've managed to get themselves into quite a mess. So it's not just a social thing, it always moves into about levy arrears or defamation, so it hasn't been I'm not saying a total failure, but it hasn't been a great experience for a number of strata plans. But that's a problem yet to be resolved, I think. Okay.
Well, that's good. Well, look, we've spent a lot of time talking about relationships today, and honestly the information that you've shared with us is so rich, especially rich in your experience and in your knowledge. And I just really want to say thank you so much for joining me, Margaret, and taking the time out. And if anyone has any questions, what you can do is you can actually put questions down the bottom in the comments section, and we'll do our very best to answer any of the questions that you might have. And this is also going to be uploaded to YouTube as well. So if you do want to have a look there or share the video around, you're very welcome to do that. So thank you again, Margaret, and thanks for watching. I appreciate it.
That's a pleasure, Beck, and I hope you and everyone listening obtain some great information that they can use.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Margaret. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Beck.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Bye.